Wales, land of the dragon, leeks, Tom Jones's, whiskey. Yep, you heard me, Welsh whiskey, and this time, Penderyn. Hello and welcome to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. I hope I find you in fine fettle. It is review number 30, part 3 of my series looking at World Whiskey Awareness. Let's just get rid of that guy. He's so 2020. Yes, welcome back to another whiskey review with me, the Whiskey Novice. Thank you for joining me for review number 197. Yes, this is a re-review. It's the start of a series of re-reviews, a short series. And what's the reason behind this series of re-reviews? Well, there's a few whiskies that I have reviewed over the years, and some of them sort of have got a lot of these reviews have maybe had a lot of views and people have watched them, and I've just wanted to maybe go back and see, has my palate changed? Certain ones that maybe a few people have disagreed with me or something, just for some reason. When I get to the end of this series, it will make more sense. I think in my head it makes more sense. But for now, this is a re-review, and a re-review of this one, Penderyn Madeira, the Penderyn distillery there. I reviewed this in, March 2020, so over almost 3.5 years ago, good grief. Feels like an awful lot longer. So Welsh whiskey, and I mean Penderyn doing very well for themselves. They launched in 2004 in the region of the Brecon Beacons there in Wales, and I think since have added another 2 distilleries, one in Llandudno and one in Swansea. So they're doing very well for themselves. Fair play to them. This, as I said, a whiskey I reviewed, I think it was review number 30, something like that, in March of 2020. And it was a whiskey at the time I remember thinking very sweet. Now, I have not went back and watched that review. I have not went back and reread my tasting notes. I basically come back and decided to do this all again from scratch. Start with the whiskey again, see if my palate has changed. This is the self-same bottle that I reviewed 3.5 years ago. You can see how much has come out of the bottle. You can see how many times I visited in that time. So this one, a single malt bottle of 46%, non-chill filtered, no colour added. Fair play to Penderyn there, and finished in Madeira casks. Let's get in, shall we? Before I get in, I remember, the one thing I do remember, the one thing that stood out to me about that review 3.5 years ago was that I found this sweet. How do I find it now? Sweet. Sharp. Nail polish remover / acetone. It is sweet. Pear drops. Dusty corn. I know this is malt whiskey because it says on the label that it's malt whiskey. But my nose is telling me different. It just, to me, noses like a grain whiskey. Now, it's not bad. I'm not saying that it's bad. That's the thing. I might have come across 3.5 years ago that I didn't necessarily like this. I can't remember. It's not... I'm trying to do my usual and give you my full view of the whiskey, whether I like it or not. We'll get to that, I suppose, at the end. So it is sweet, it is sharp. You know, if you have a sweet tooth, this will be right up your street. It really would. And I don't know whether it's the Madeira finish on it. I've already said it, it does not act like a malt whiskey. Let's try the palate. Bittersweet arrival. Do you know, yeah, it is a bittersweet arrival. However, that sweetness, rather than, I've talked about the map of the tongue before, the sweetness really should be picking up first. The sweetness tends to wash to the back of the palate. And it's not just sweet on the nose or sharp on the nose, it's also sharp on the palate. There's a perfumed floral note, which doesn't really go against it. A bit like Parma Violets. Yeah. The sweetness, yeah, it's sharp all along, it's sweet all along. And it sort of heads into what is a fairly short finish, which is just about sharp citrus again. It's actually going hot, so it's I don't know. It hasn't changed a lot in my opinion from what I remember it being. Sweet, as I said, sharp, not a whole lot going on. I know a lot of people like this. It's not for me. I'm not going to add water. Do you know, water did, during my tasting notes, it did, I remember, improve it slightly, but I think what it did was it took a bit of the heat out of the finish. It rounded off some of those sharp edges, but it didn't bring anything new. The floral note, which I mentioned in the nose earlier, started to appear it was either the nose or the palate, whichever it was. It moved into the other, and it just wasn't terribly appealing. So look, it's like this. Would I replace it? No, I wouldn't. 25 to 40 pounds. This it's quite a swing on this. It's a decent enough whiskey for. I can imagine why there's people get into this sweet, sharp. If, as I said earlier, if you have a sweet tooth, this would be right up your street. It really would, because it is a sweet whiskey. I think I maybe said that it acts like a grain whiskey. Certainly said that. It still acts like a grain whiskey. This is malt whiskey. Certainly doesn't act like it. It's not bad, but just for me personally, it's just too sweet, too sharp. But I could understand why people would get into it, because sweet it's an easy thing to lend itself to your palate. It's an easy way to go. More people, I would say, probably have a sweet tooth than don't. So if sweet is your thing, then, you know, things like this are going to... That's why Irish whiskey is so popular. I'm convinced of it. This is just too sweet for me. And for that reason, I wouldn't replace it. So there, let's just move on from that. Right then, so then, what would I suggest as an alternative? Well, if sweet's your thing, if you've had this and you enjoyed it, then I'm going to suggest something that I find sweet but pleasant. So it involves a little magic again. It's one that I don't have in my collection currently, but one I always rave about. It is, bing, this Teeling single grain. And it is a single grain. So I am convinced that this just acts more like a grain whiskey than it does like a malt whiskey. Once again, no bad thing. If sweet is your thing, that's okay. I'm not saying that Penderyn are trying to fool us in any way, shape or form here. If they tell me it's a malt whiskey, it's a malt whiskey. But it's just not, it's too sweet for my palate. Teeling single grain, I know it's a sweet whiskey. Technically on paper, Teeling single grain is a bourbon actually. It's 95% corn mash bill, finished or matured. I think it's actually fully matured in Cabernet Sauvignon casks. So it is sweet already. We know it's sweet. Technically, I mean, the form would say it's sweet, but it's good. It's a good sweet. It works really, really well for me. Always worked well. So if you've had Penderyn, this is why this was actually quite an easy suggestion for me. If you've had Penderyn Madeira and you enjoyed it, well then maybe you should look at tealing single grain. I know one's a malt, one's a grain. What difference does it make? If this is your thing, if you've tasted this and it's the flavour profile that you enjoy, then I imagine you would like tealing single grain. So there you go, just a suggestion. Let's get rid of that. Yeah, no, not for me. Penderyn, not for me. But I can understand, as I said, why, because it's so sweet, I can understand why people would like it. But we'll leave it at that. It's me looking back over this. Wasn't thrilled by it the first time round. Not thrilled by it this time round. That doesn't say it's necessarily a bad whiskey. Remember, it's just my opinion. There you go. Thank you very much for joining me. Thank you very, very much to my patrons. Should you wish to should you wish to join that group, the details are in the video description below, and I will leave a little video link up here just in case you want to know anything more about my patronage. Till the next time, my friends, and especially to you, my Welsh friends, look after yourselves. Here's to your good health. Iechyd da! Hey, thanks for watching my video. Please click and subscribe to be notified of further content.